Welcome to another Q&A. Um, this is the first question for today. It's by Jonathan. Not sure if you've done this already, but a general question I think could be good is, what's the difference between serverless and headless? I actually had to go look it up just to make sure that I had the right idea because I don't work with JavaScript as much, and the idea of headless is something that I get conceptually, but I wasn't exactly sure I was right about it. So what is headless? Headless is basically the idea that you want to disconnect um, your back end or your front end, or basically the data with the presentation layer. So that's why headless is often like, in my head anyhow. I always think of headless whenever somebody is doing something with WordPress that's with a JavaScript framework. So if you're using Next.js on top of WordPress to build the website using either the GraphQL API or just a regular REST API, that to me is headless. So it's really about decoupling the actual content with the actual presentation, because normally the two are linked. It's PHP that handles it's PHP slash WordPress that handles the presentation um, and the data. Meanwhile, with serverless is completely unrelated to that. It's really the idea that you shouldn't even have to worry about what the server itself. So it's still there, but the idea is that you're like paying for computing. So you're paying for each time that PHP runs, as opposed to paying for the server that PHP runs on, which is very different from how things have been done for a long time. But it's not that different than if you use something like Heroku, like a platform as a service. When you work with a platform as a service, you're never really aware of what's the server. Which version are you using? Ubuntu or CentOS? Are you like, what's on the server? All those things. What's handling the security? How do I SSH in? All those things that are very server related don't really exist with platforms as a service. But the big difference is that you pay per month. So you, like with Heroku, you pay, like, let's say I have one dyno, well, I'll pay X amount for that dyno for the month. Meanwhile, serverless is really pure pay per use. So you would just, if my code runs 0 times, I pay $0. If it runs 100,000 times, I pay 100,000 times. Well, basically for those 100,000 requests, which isn't very different. Like if you look at the pricing for Netlify, or I don't know Vercel's pricing as much, but they're both kind of this idea of serverless as well. They have tiers and how many function runs you're allowed. So it's that idea of your code is executed and you pay for when that code gets executed, as opposed to paying for the server itself. Now you can have serverless and headless do together. You could have PHP run, like your WordPress site running on serverless, like Ymir or with Bref or whatnot, and then have a headless part, JavaScript front end that's running on Vercel with Next.js or Netlify, whichever you like. But those two things are not mutually exclusive. It's just, for oftentimes they've been synonymous, especially in the JavaScript space, because oftentimes your headless applications are deployed on serverless infrastructure. So that's why there's a lot of convolution between the two, but they're really two very different things. So I hope that helps answer the question.